somewhat was not recorded. My focus and goal was to not injure anybody, not to take any life. Prior to me coming up with a plan on how to seize the vessel, there were many things thrown out between the two of us before the mutiny. And one of them was the ship's axe, a fire axe in every passageway. There was always a couple of fire axes at either end. And my concept was to make this a non-violent, even though we were using guns, but it was to be non-violent, and that we focused on these weapons were only to ensure our safety. So if somebody was to attack us, then that was a different issue. And my comrade didn't necessarily agree with me. In fact, did not, but ended up convincing him that we could do this without violence. So going back to the vessel, when we entered Cambodia, I already told you that it was not a non-violent coup d'etat. I want to go back to that in just a second. One of the things I wanted to say was that when he and I had our conversations about where to take the vessel, I was willing to run it aground in Thailand, straight into the sandbank. And we kept one life preserver lifeboat on the vessel. One or two. I think we kept one on the vessel. I know we kept one, but there's a possibility there were two. And the focus was that if we were going to run it aground, just to kick up the RPMs on the prop and just steer it straight into the beach, which I would have done. I think that one of the important things is that neither one of us thought we would live through this mutiny. We had to resolve that issue ourselves in order to even do this mutiny. Secondly, we didn't think that if we lived through the mutiny, we didn't think we would live in Cambodia. We figured that we would be assassinated. And thirdly, if we weren't, and we ended up being arrested and returned to the United States, we did not expect to live through that experience. And so it was one thing after the other that we had to have these discussions on and come to the conclusion that we had to agree to that risk. And we were trying to do it in a workers' format. My goal was to save the workers. I wanted to round up and arrest all of the officers, and that's what I did. One of the conversations Clyde and I had involved Cambodia and Laos and Thailand and Burma and Vietnam, all in the one conversation. We figured that these bombs, being napalm, that they would be used in short-range flights, not necessarily a flight from Bangkok, Thailand to Sahip in Vietnam. And you've been to Sahip and Sahip, Thailand? Oh, not Sahip, Tan Son Nhut. And so the focus was, we realized that that's what they weren't going to transport them there, otherwise they would have brought us in through Saigon area. And so we figured that they were going to be used in one place, and that one place was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We figured they were going to be used in Laos and in Cambodia. Laos and Cambodia. And both were neutral countries. That was a war crime in and of itself that they were dropping bombs in both of those places. So we had to really think about this and where we were going to take it. Do you have anything you would like to ask Brian about that? No. But you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. It was critical that was understood. That we had an idea where these bombs were going. You're not supposed to talk about your ship and where it's going to, what port it's been in. But sailors are sailors. We talk amongst each other. The workers, we all talk amongst each other. So we knew what was happening.
You knew where those bombs were
We
going.
knew where those
Brian
bombs-
knew
yeah.
where those arms were going.
Yes.
I mean, it was going to result in dead kids, dead innocent people.
Absolutely.
That was
Chris,
the
you
reality.
absolutely hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And I was, after coming back from Vietnam that first trip, I had to weigh it out what was going on. And when I returned home to the U.S., my entire circle of support and friends dropped me like a hot rock. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with me because I was a traitor. I went to Vietnam. I told them, what are you doing to stop the war? I know where there's an ammo dump. I know how to get into that ammo dump. Do you want to come and let's go? I'll take you. We'll go to all together, and we will stop. We can set it afire. And trust me on this. Not that the people don't go near exploding ammo. They want to get away from it. And my friends at that point thought I was insane. That I was crazy. And nobody wanted to have anything to do with me. But I'm jumping around. I know I'm jumping around, and I'm sorry.
No, it's...
I really don't mean to do that.
That's the magic of editing.
But knowing I've been on many ships, and we always knew where they were going. We always knew what the product is that's going into the vessel and where it's going to end up. The first trip, I knew exactly where we were going, Cameron Bay. I knew exactly what we had. We were sitting on the deck were two fast boats. We knew the ammunition. We knew where the detonators were. We knew where the explosives were. They didn't mingle together. So, as the workers on the ship, we all knew what these things were and where they were going. And that's part of the reason why I say any sailor is complicit in anything that they're carrying. Is don't trust that they don't know. They do. They just don't want to talk about it. So therefore, when we got to Cambodia, we requested the vessel to be held for the duration of the Southeast Asian War.
The U.S. war.
The U.S. war. Well, we called it the Southeast Asian when we said it. You're right, but we didn't identify that. We just said the Southeast Asian War. And again, Americans were clueless. The government knew, and not only the government, but Congress knew that these bombs were being dropped on Laos and Cambodia. In fact, to prove the point, if you Google the original articles of impeachment for Richard Nixon, the original articles, one of them included the illegal bombing of Laos and Cambodia. Mm-hmm. That was dropped, and the reason they dropped it in the final write-up of the impeachment articles was because Congress knew it. It didn't happen in a vacuum. They knew it. So they were complicit also in the war crimes.
And you didn't want to be complicit too?
I wanted this war over. I wanted it finished. And if it meant that we sacrificed our lives, we were prepared and willing to do that. When Brian Willson he stood up for his beliefs and did his best to stop those armaments from arriving in this country. Regrettably, he got hit, and I don't think he meant that. I don't think he meant to get hit.
I was shocked, and I woke up in the hospital, and Holly, my partner, sitting next to the bed. I thought I was in jail. You know, I had no memory for 2 or 3 days, and she said, "Honey, you're not in a jail. You're in a hospital bed." I couldn't believe it, because I thought I had the perfect photograph of a train stopping for 3 guys. You would be arrested. You're in prison. We're gonna fix it, get it.
You have to explain a little bit what you were doing because people don't understand that you're talking between each other.
This is
What happened there? What you were doing?
all this part will be edited.
Yeah.
I'm certain Chris
Well,
will do an excellent job.
We knew where the weapons were coming from to El Salvador and Nicaragua during the Reagan years, and they were coming from the Concord, California Naval Weapons Station. We had to build a lading.
Yes.
Showed the shipments and how many bombs and how many torpedoes. And, so we decided, since nobody else was going to stop the funding, I mean, like Congress or the president, we decided we'd stop the munitions ourselves. At least for a few minutes or a few hours. But we wanted to get the photo that showed a train crew, Navy personnel, stopping because that's what they always did when something was on the tracks. The speed limit was 5 miles an hour. The train goes very slowly, it's loaded with lethal munitions. I wasn't worried at all. I knew I was gonna get arrested. And I was doing a 40-day fast on the tracks, which started on September 1st, to go 40 days. If I was in jail, I'd be fasting also for 40 days. So I had written the commander. I have the letter, a copy of the letter I sent to the commander explaining what we were going to do, plenty of time in advance for him to know that we were now going to be on the tracks, blocking the trains, and they had to make a decision to either uphold international law and not move the munitions that are destined to kill campesinos in Nicaragua, or they could stop and haul us off the tracks, or they could run over us. And of course, I didn't take seriously that they were going to run over us. In fact, there were 3 of us: David Duncombe, Duncan Murphy, and myself.
And one of them we just lost. We just lost one of those comrades.
Well, David Hartzell wasn't on the tracks, he was next to the tracks. So, the first train came about 1 minute before noon. We could see it coming. So we took our positions with a big banner behind us, as big as that banner, that said Nuremberg Actions. And that banner, by the way, could have carried through the war zones in Nicaragua. That very banner. So, we took our positions, and I was sitting on my rump. Duncan was crouched, and David Duncombe was in a half crouch. But we were, all 3 of us, inside the rails. And so as the train was coming, I expected, to be arrested, which was the norm. And I think the only reason my body was moving at the last minute was because my autonomic nervous system said, "Get the fuck away from this train." Because in my mind, I wasn't going to leave the tracks. We were going to get arrested. You were going to have to deal with us. And David Duncan got off in time. He was on the left side, I was on the right side. Duncan Murphy was in the center. He was 67 years old. He jumped at the last minute. He didn't get out of the way of the train. He jumped up and grabbed the counter railing where the 2 spotters were standing. And for a moment, he was holding the same railing as the spotters. And then he jumped off the train, and it was, according to the FBI, going to 16 miles an hour. He jumped off to run back, waiting for the boxcars to get over my crumpled body, and he and Holly were the first ones to my body after the boxcars were gone. And I have no memory of this, so I know we had about 40 friends there that day, and I know from hearing them. And of course, I was married to Holly, and she was being very confident, working on stopping the bleeding in my left leg.
Mm-hmm.
And David Hartzell, his name died yesterday, he was holding my left ear, which had been almost sliced off, my outer ear. And he was also protecting my brain, which was exposed to this big hole in my skull. So I remember I had it. It's in the film, playing the first piece. You see the close-up of me on the track. Moment or something. I hear the commotion of people around me. So, I had already decided when I went on the fast a year before, the Veterans Fast for Life, I had made a decision then to give up my life if necessary to stop the munitions going to Nicaragua. So at that point I had lost my fear of death. I had no fear of dying whatsoever. That had happened a year before. I wasn't prepared for this one, but I'd already gone through the process of saying, I'm not afraid of death, and I'm going to operate it. No matter what, I'll be conscientious and conservative in my way of doing it, but I was prepared to die. In fact, I thought I was going to die a year before on the fast, after 47 days. But at any rate, I was mentally as prepared as I could be for an arrest. The penalty was a year in prison and a $5,000 fine, which was posted on a big sign where we were vigiling. So I woke up and it took me a week to realize that I didn't have many legs, and I had a fractured skull. And I was all wrapped up. And I didn't see my new legs, stumps, until 2 weeks later in the hospital they changed casts. I said, wow, so there were my stumps. That was what's left. And that's the first time I actually really understood I don't have any legs.
Yes.
And so I had a tremendous support group around me, and I was shocked. But even Rosario came to visit, the current president, co-president of Glatkowski, came to visit me in the hospital with 6 of her children. I don't even remember that, but I see her on this video talking to me, and I'm talking to her. In the bed, and she's talking to me and standing next to the bed. So, another experience of dealing with the vicious empire of the United States.
Exactly.
It's vicious, it's cruel, it's brutal, it has no conscience whatsoever.
It has none. The weapon industry has none either.
No moral compass at all. I did expect to get arrested, but when I realized I was almost killed, I mean, the first reports were that he was dead because of the brain damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, when I started talking to Holly in the hospital, I said, well, I can talk. She was crying because she was so happy that I was talking.
Right.
She didn't know if I was a vegetable or what was going to happen to me. And we started conversing. And that was amazing. She was crying just out of joy. And I was actually can converse even with this big hole in my head and missing most of my right frontal lobe. So anyway, I was there for a month, and I had a prosthetist lined up. Give me my first set of artificial legs, and I've been walking on them ever since. 37 years.
The thing you brought up that really strikes home is your fear of death. and you have to overcome that.
Oh, yeah, I had already done it here before.
Exactly, and that's one of the biggest challenges that people have. Veterans have to overcome that. We went through the same thing, that same fear of death. But I can't speak for my comrade because he's dead now. But I can tell you that it was an absolute, I remember clearly when I came to that understanding. And it
But
was,
you were only 20.
I was 20 years old.
And I was 40, 45 or 46. Much more developed brain.
Yes, your brain was more developed than mine. That's true. Even missing a piece. I can tell you how I experienced that fear of death and how it resolved it. And it's still, to this moment, as clear as a bell. It was, I went to, we had retrieved the two weapons that were hidden on the vessel. We were sitting on my bunk. We were going to load them, check them, make sure they were clean, and we could shoot. As soon as my gun was simpler than my buddy's, and I had a revolver and we had a semi-automatic, Walther PPK or something. It was a Walther 9mm, and I told him, I said, look, I'll be right back. Where are you going? I'm going to go piss before that we do this. I don't want to be up there and have to piss and leave you alone in a room. And so I got up, and the head was right across the hall from my forecastle. And I stepped out and went into the head, did my business, walked over to the sink, and I'm looking at the mirror. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm talking to myself in my brain in front of this mirror. And I said to myself, how would you ever be able to look at your child and say, I did nothing to stop this war. I want to be able to say, I did what was necessary to stop this war. If I survived. And that was the way it went. And I may not survive. And if I was to survive this, I may not survive this next section. And if I survive that, I may not survive the next.
Never know.
You never know. And at that point, I washed my hands, splashed some water on my face, took my hands and dried them through my hair. Pulled my hair straight back. And walked back into the forecastle, picked up my gun, and my buddy was finished with his, and I said, let's go. We
How
walked.
many crew? How many were in the crew?
Oh, I think around 35, 36, something like that. And enough that they would fill all four life rafts if we needed to. I believe we had one that was motorized, and that was the one that pulled them along. And we get to the first passageway ladder that went up to the next deck. And my comrade had already taken 4 or 5 steps, and I was right behind him, maybe 2 steps away. And he turned around and stopped and said, I don't want you to take the blame for this. You've got a wife, she's pregnant, you're going to have a baby. If we get caught, you say, I made you do this. And I just looked at him and I said, what the fuck? You think I'm going to do that? And I told him, I said, I'm in this just like you. We're together on this, or it's not going to happen. And he turned around and said, I said, let's go. He turned around and up we walked. And I went into the skipper's office. knocked on the door, heard someone take them in. I stepped in and I said, "Hi, Captain Sal here. Look, I had something I wanted to talk to you about." And
Oh, what's his rank?
he was the skipper, the captain. And we held him under gun. My partner did. Nobody saw my gun. My gun wasn't visible. It was in my waistband. And I was a lot skinnier than I am now. And it was in my waistband, and I had my shirt out of my waistband, which is, I didn't normally do that. I had my shirt tucked always when I was on short shift. And we waited just for a minute. I asked the captain to sit down in this L-shaped sitting area where he could meet with his officers and lay out charts or anything on the table. And I had him sit down. He wanted to know what was going on. And I told him that this is a revolutionary hijacking.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly right. Well, wait a minute, what are you all talking about? He sees my buddy's gun. He's got a portfolio and the gun's inside of it. He opens it up, pulls the gun out. And the rest got pretty hairy after that. I got one of the officers into the room. Oh, I think I told him, no problem at all. The captain asked me to get it. Thank you so much. Closed the door, locked it, handed it to the skipper. Now the skipper's got the noonday report exactly where we're at. It's already been transmitted to the shipping company. It's already been transmitted to the insurance companies. And then I opened the door and went in to get Sparks, and I had Sparks in there. He was also an officer. So now he's in the room. So I think we had 3 people in there at that point. And the one that I needed to get the most was the chief mate. The chief mate was the one who was the most belligerent and hard. He was an alcoholic. He had lots of whiskey bottles. Every time I had to clean his room, there was always a whiskey. Not every time, but there was a word for it, but I don't remember. And he all of a sudden got up and he made this move with his arms outstretched. And Clyde was about from here where I'm standing to this column from him. And I can easily remember, I remember it so clearly because, and every time I remember it, I want to act it out. Did I do something wrong? What had happened? And he started to walk and he spread his arms out to, like he was going to be a tackler, but why? At which point, I did the deed where I took my hand, pulled the gun out, and I dropped down, and I told him I was going to blast him all the way through the fucking bulkhead because he said his ass down. I did a lot of cussing. I cussed a lot. I don't know any seamen that don't. He immediately sat down because nobody knew I had a gun. And then the skipper said, what do you want? What do you need? And I told him I need you to get on that phone right there, call up to the bridge, and have him tell him there was a bomb on board. There's a timer set to detonate, and then we need to have manage it with all hands right at this moment. My goal was to keep the skeleton cool crew, and that skeleton crew would be at the stations, but not to launch all of the lifeboats, which are on the port side had to be on starboard, had to be ready to go. So the crews bailed into those, and thinking that it was a fire drill, and which we had just had a few days before. And this time they lowered the boats with the crew, and when the boats were in the water alongside, we already slowed down to dead slow. And as soon as the boats hit the water, we knew that our skeleton crew was here, and the rest of the crew was over the side. Sparks had already told me there was a ship behind us, and a couple of days behind us, a couple of hours behind us. They've been following us for days. And they were going to pass us, and we were slowing down our speed so that they could get ahead into port first. I had the captain go back to his room and we locked the door. He could unlock it from the inside, but we locked it anyway, told him he was not allowed to come out of the room. He came out of the room. One of the others did something. At that point, we took the skipper. We sent the chief mate down below. Took the skipper and the Sparks. We went up topside, and the mate on duty up there and the crew, when they saw the guns, they wanted to back away and let loose in the helm. And I instructed them to please man the helm again, maintain course, and I became the skipper. So that's it. We found out later that 2 people stayed on that we specifically wanted to get off of the vessel. And one of them was drunk and slept through it. Another one was, he didn't want to get in the boat because he thought something was screwy going on. People told me that he was a government agent that was on the vessel, and that's what I heard. That's why I wanted him off the vessel. So we both sacrificed, but you sacrificed your legs. I only sacrificed 10 years of my life. Which is more valuable? Which one's cost the worst? I honestly believe that you had a much harder time than I did. But I do know this from the bottom of my heart. I love what you did. I love your action. And as much as you sacrificed for me, it's an example of some of the things, not necessarily to sacrifice your life, but it's an example of some of the things that I believe will bring a quicker downfall to the country if people started doing similar things again. I'm not suggesting people do armed mutinies. I would like to see it. I would like to see it happen. I don't expect people to march in the streets with guns. They're already doing it. They're already doing it. And now with a lot of those hidden concealed carry. All the states have different laws on it, but they're liberalizing them even more now. I imagine if Nixon had his way, he would have tried you for treason.
Pardon me?
He would have tried you for treason, Nixon, if he had his way.
Yeah.
But it fell into there were certain laws. There's laws that have to be passed. They demanded that I be tried for treason. The captain of the vessel said that we did an excellent job, didn't hurt anybody. He loved the fact that we pulled this off without hurting anyone. And then as soon as he gets in front of the press, he demands the death penalty. So, like I said, I wasn't going to die doing this. I was going to die doing these other things. I was unaware that I could not be tried for treason. I was unaware that I could not be tried for sentenced to death for mutiny. I got the maximum sentence.
For a person your age?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. FYCA, Federal Youth Corrections Act. And then when I got in, they changed me from that status to special offender, which is a thing that they did for organized criminals, organized crime. They took any body that was involved in, like the Weathermen, SLA, PLA, around all of the different organizations. If they had armed people, it was considered special offender status. And which was originally set up for organized crime. It was hard and it was difficult. During the time was difficult and hard. I don't know where we go from here. We both are doing what we can to get the word out that people, we need to step up what we're doing.
Well, I think that the Trump administration's policies as monarch, as a king, are getting more and more intense.
Yes.
And it may be the trigger that people need to revolt, because nobody's rights, there's no rights,
There's no rights anymore.
there's no law, and people may catch on like, ooh, we're going to have to deal with it ourselves in some kind of collective way. Maybe many places, and there are a lot of street demonstrations now against Trump. In my case, my fast in September of '86, I had already seen what the posters were doing, and the first, right after I was here in 1986, they attacked 3 farming cooperatives near where I was in school. You may have heard this before, and they killed 11 Palestinos. And in 2 days, some of those bodies came into the cemetery in Astoree in open caskets on horse-drawn lead. And I was standing there with my Nicaraguan mother, and I started weeping, and I was like, weep, seeing these faces in the open caskets. And she thought I was scared, and I said, I didn't have any vocabulary in my dictionary. I said, furioso. Furioso. Yes, that was like being furious. Furioso. And that was the best I could say, but that experience is when I realized, really clearly realized, that this is the way that globalization and civilization has been happening for 500 years. You go into a country with guns, kill people, and take over. And I realized this is the normal policy of an empire. And that's when my first idea to go on a fast, which I did in September of that year, with 3 other veterans, one of whom was Humphrey Murphy, who was living on the tracks. But I was so furious. I was so angry, because I've been angry for 55 years ever since I left Vietnam. But, and I met, when I was in Nicaragua that first time, witnessed the body coming out of the cemetery. 2 days later, I met Charlie Lipke, who was in country on a witness for peace delegation. And we had a conversation in Managua at the Witness for Peace House. What are we going to do? We started talking about Bobby Sands, the guy was hunger stricken.
Yes.
We started talking about this other guy that did hunger strikes for the homeless. I can't think of his name right now. And we said, we were talking, we probably talked for 3 or 4 hours. Are we willing to immolate ourselves? Because he knew about Norman Morrison,
Right.
who was from my high school. But he was ahead of me, so we weren't the same age. And he immolated himself in the Pentagon parking lot. Or do we do Bobby Sands? Or something else. So, over the course of the next few months, we actually cased the Capitol to see whether we could get up to the top. for the statue of the Indian,
Yes.
and poured red
Good.
fluid down the veins of the Capitol dome. And we were in the beginning stage of figuring out whether we could even do it.
Right.
But we did all that planning in Charlie Clement's office in Washington. Charlie Clements was a Vietnam veteran pilot who had turned against the war. And he was talking to us about organizing in senatorial campaigns to get new senators. We said, no, we're done with that.
Yes.
We're done with electoral politics. So we spent probably a month going to the Capitol building, getting up as high as we could in the normal public areas, and then figuring out how do we get to the next stage and then another stage. And we had a grappling hook. We knew we would need a grappling hook. Hopefully that we would catch something that we could put near the Capitol dome. But we figured we couldn't pull it off. And so we scrapped it and instead decided to do an open-ended water limit fast. And I was in the Senate, I was in the House chambers when the House voted on $100 million new bill for the home, which is in June, late June of 1986. And the final vote was 221 to 209 for the $100 million. And sitting next to us in the next aisle, but with a walkway between us, were three country leaders, including Adolfo Colero, who was their political leader. And they all stood up and cheered. And the Capitol Police came in and said, you can't cheer from the balcony. And but the vote was done. And I went to a payphone and called Charlie, who was in San Francisco, and said, okay, let's start the plan for the fast. The $100 million got passed. And so we did. We started planning the fast. Dr. Murphy joined right away. Charlie wanted to return his Medal of Honor to the Vietnam Wall beforehand. Mm-hmm. We did that on July 29th, 1986. And then that meant we had all of August to get our shit together, do our pre-fasting diets with wheatgrass and so forth. And so I had my will all written, and my ashes were to go to Glatkowski, to where my mother lived. I did a lot of money, sprinkled in her backyard. And so I had that detail taken care of.
Right.
And when we decided to stop the fast, after George Mizo, on the 47th day, was diagnosed by our doctor as being 1 or 2 days away from death if he didn't get some glucose into his brain. And we had agreed in advance we didn't want to be brought out homeless. But when George was near death, we had another meeting, 4 of us. And our support group for that time in DC was maybe 35 people that were coming to the steps every day, giving us support. And then we had hundreds and hundreds of people coming by the 30th day of that. And Duncan wanted to stop the fast to save George's life. Charlie wanted to continue the fast as we had originally planned. And I was like in the middle. But we finally decided to stop the fast. We've been on the Donahue show 2 or 3 days earlier. And so, when we stopped the fast, I thought, now what am I going to do? I figured this was it.
Right.
I kind of started thinking, a new plan? I had to do some more thinking. And I had no idea what I was going to do. But the Nicaraguan government invited us all to Nicaragua after the fact. And we went down there in late October, early November. And we had here for the 25th anniversary of the founding of the FSLN. And I spoke with Captain Thomas Zancata from Burkina Faso, who was a revolutionary president, who was assassinated 3 months later, and Ortega. So it was me, Zancata, and Ortega. And I was speaking to 350,000 people. I didn't speak for very long. I had to translate repeating what I'm saying. And then
And that's history, folks.